Moving on from fitting the anchor trolley in this kayak, I'm now going to fit the rod holders that I need for my fishing. And the idea is that these rod holders will be transferable. In other words, these are exactly the same rod holders that I use on my Prowler big game. And what I want to do is when I want to use the Thresher, is just actually transfer these rod holders from the big game to the Thresher and vice versa, rather than buying new rod holders. And the rod holders I use, I've got a couple of Scotty Rod Holders here. This is a Scotty Orca and a Scotty rocket launcher that I tend to use for my trolling. But I've also got a couple of ram tubes which I use when I'm fishing with bait on the bottom at anchor. And to fit these, I've got, for the Scotty Rod Holders, I've got a couple of Scotty gearhead track adapters there, and for the ram tubes, a couple of ram track mounts, 1.5 inch ram track mounts. Now the fitting of these rod holders is going to be the easiest fitting that I've ever done compared to fitting them on the big game, because I've got these track systems that come with the kayak. So this is going to be a pretty quick video. But what I'll do is, when I fit the rod holders in the various positions, I'll explain why I've got them in those positions and how I'm actually going to use them. The first rod holders I'm going to fit are my Scotty Rod Holders, which I tend to use for trolling. And the idea is to have basically the same setup that I've got on my Prowler big game. And the reason for that is because it works. So using the Scotty Gearhead track adapter, I'm going to just have the Scotty Orca rod holder on the left side of the kayak. So I just need to slide that track adapter on and put it in, at the moment, sort of roughly the position that I think will be okay. And of course the great thing about these track systems and using this track adapter is that if it's the wrong position, I find it's the wrong position when I'm out on the water, then I can simply adjust it and maybe move it a little bit further forward or back. So just tighten that up as much as I can by hand, and then what I'm going to do is use one of the rod holders as a lever just to tighten it up a little bit more than I can do by hand, just to give that extra secure hold. And then all I need to do then is to pop the Orca rod holder in, and it just pushes in and locks in, and then when you want to take it back out again, it's just a matter of turning the top of the track adapter there and pulling it out. So pretty straightforward really. And so that's the Orca done, and when I put a rod in there a little bit later, I'll just test it and see if I have to move it around a bit. With the Orca, I mean, this is just a fixed setting that I've got on the big game, but I can actually level that off a bit if I want to, just by adjusting this knob here, and then I can maybe make that a bit more parallel to the water. But we'll just leave it as it is at the moment, and then I'll test that when I'm actually out on the water. Now when it comes to the rocket launcher, I'm going to fit it to the track system that I've got here on the center hatch, and again very similar to what I've got on the big game. And once again, it's just a matter of sliding the gearhead track adapter to the position that I want it and tighten it up by hand as much as I can. And once again, I'm just going to finish it off using the rod holder as a lever so I can get more leverage, just to tighten it that little bit more. And then pop the rocket launcher in more or less the position that I think that it should be. So that's the Scotty, subject to adjustments, that's the Scotty Rod Holders done. But what I'll do now is I'll get a couple of rods and pop them in and try and explain to you how I actually use these and why they're in these positions. I've got a couple of rods in these rod holders now, and just to explain how I use them, which is mainly for trolling. And when I'm trolling, I like to have the rod holder forward and in front of me so that I can actually see the rod tips, rather than having the rods behind me, maybe in flush mounted rod holders behind my seat, where maybe I can't see the rod tip and I have to listen or keep turning to look to see if I've got a take. So having them forward like this is really, really useful. But having them forward, by having them forward, they have to be far enough forward and high enough so they don't interfere with your paddling. And if you notice here on the Orca, I've got this height extender here which raises the rod holder up, and I've got loads of space here and plenty of room for me to actually paddle under the rod holder, and the paddling won't interfere with the rod. And likewise on the other side, by positioning the rocket launcher here at this angle, as you can see, it raises it up quite high, and once again it's far enough forward that I can reach both of these quite easily, but high enough that I can paddle actually underneath the rod and underneath the reel. So there's plenty of ways that you can do this, and it's really down to your personal choice. But this particular setup I found works really, really well for me, having these trolling rod holders forward of me where I can see them, and that's why I've stuck with this system, the system that I got on the Prowler Big Game for this kayak as well. So that's the Scotty Rod Holders done, and like I've said, when I'm out on the water I can actually then really, really test these and just move them on the track systems if necessary. Now to fit the ram tubes, and I'm going to fit them on the tracks that I've got either side of the kayak that are slightly behind my seat, and using the ram track mount. And once again it's just a matter of sliding the mount onto the track and then tighten it down, and I'm going to position it at the furthest point forward on this track, tighten it down as much as I can by hand. And what I'll probably do, the same as I did with the Scotty mount, is actually use the rod holder as a bit of a lever to tighten it down a bit more. But for the moment then it's just a matter of popping the ram tube on, tightening that up, and it's done. So what I'm going to do now is exactly the same on the other side. Right, so that's the two ram tubes fitted. Now with the ram tubes, what I tend to use those for is when I'm fishing at anchor with bait on the bottom, and then you can just position the ram tubes at the angle that you want, and you're sitting in your seat here and you've got both rods. If you've got two rods out, which is generally the way that I tend to fish, you've got two rods out, and you can sit there waiting for a bite, and then of course from your seat, when you get a bite, you just take hold of the rod and play the fish, and back it goes into the holder. I don't tend to like to use ram tubes for trolling, because what I have found in the past is no matter how much you tighten these up on these balls here, if you've got this out sideways and you get a take from a decent fish, these do tend to slip. But it's not a problem when you're actually fishing like this with rods in the rod holder, fishing bait on the bottom. And of course, when you finished your fishing session and you want to come in, just loosen these off, and then of course they can fold down nicely out of the way when you finish fishing. So that's it, that's the rod holders done. 2 for trolling and 2 for fishing with bait on the bottom at anchor. And how simple is that when you've got track systems? Far simpler than having to maybe fit track systems to the kayak or put these rod holder mounts directly to the kayak. This is so much easier, and of course the other great thing is that they're adjustable. If you find when you're out on the water they're not quite in the right position, then of course you can adjust them on the track system. So what we'll look at next, in the next episode, we'll look at actually fitting the fish finder and to the FlexPod OS removable console there, and also fitting my GPS. So once again, I hope you found that useful, and many thanks for watching.